Guitar Gear Trader movie review? Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Steve, and today we are going to be doing a first for the channel. We are going to be talking about a documentary. It's not just any documentary, it's a documentary on Norm's Rare Guitars, which is a famous guitar shop in California. But first, before you get to that, before we get into it, if you would do me a favor and please subscribe to the channel, hit that bell, get the notifications when we upload stuff. If you like the content, that really helps. It'll get my videos back out to you as soon as I put them out, and it helps my channel grow. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to just talk to people about stuff I love, and I know that people are out there just like me that want to hear and talk about and discuss guitars and guitar related things and gear and stuff like that. So please subscribe and hit that bell. Today, like I said, we're going to talk about a Netflix documentary, and you can see the cover for the movie poster, I guess, for the documentary right there on the screen. And I had no idea that this was even a thing until about 3 or 4 days ago. I want to say New Year's Eve. I found out about this, and I can't even remember how I found out about it. I want to say that I was flipping through Instagram, trying to, look for whatever. And I think I saw a poster either from Norm's Instagram page, or maybe it was Netflix ad or something popped up, because I have I have the Instagram channel handle for this YouTube channel, which is at Guitar Gear Trader. So go follow me on Instagram, please. And I was like, Norm's Rare Guitar trailer. What is this all about? So I went onto YouTube and looked up the trailer, and Norm had put the trailer out on his channel, and I watched the trailer and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that this is actually a thing. I had no idea that it was going to be it's a full-length feature, movie, documentary on Netflix. It's an hour and a half long, and just to let you know right off the bat, it's great. I can't wait to watch it again. I watched it about 2 hours ago with my wife, and even she was interested in parts of it. Once they get into technical stuff with guitars, she kind of zoned out. But when his wife was on there and his daughter was on there talking, and when they're talking about the charities at the end, that was all really very interesting to my wife and kept her interested. But I just want to know, where did this come from? Like, I'm glad it happened, and I'm hoping that Netflix does more things like this with other music shops, so that we can get an insight into other, owners and other, guitar and musical instrument resellers and mom and pop shops and stuff like that, because I think it will help grow that community, right? The internet guitar world is really taking over the scene, I think, and I feel like mom and pop shops are on the decline because of these big businesses like Guitar Center, Sweetwater, Musician's Friend. It used to be Sam Ash, but Sam Ash went out of business, actually, which I was very surprised about, because that was a big New York store that everybody went to, where I'm from and where I grew up. But like a lot of the mom and pop shops that I've frequented when I was younger, they didn't have rare stuff. They didn't have vintage stuff. They had your beginner's guitars, and I think that's what most mom and pop shops are going to sell you, right? Even down here in Nashville, there are really famous guitar shops in Nashville. There's Gruhn's, and there's Carter's, and there's Rumble Seat. But like I'm like an hour away from Nashville City, so where I'm at, we have very small mom and pop shops that are going to sell guitar stands and reeds for saxophones and Epiphones, guitars and Squires and things like that. Maybe they'll have, you know, one or two upscale Gretsch guitars. Maybe they'll have a Country Gentleman in the shop, or maybe they'll have a White Falcon. But for the most part, you know, if they have one or two Gibsons, you know, Les Pauls, that'll be a lot, you know. But most of the time, it's going to be Epiphone, you know, Fender Squire, Fender Mexican made stuff. The lower end Japanese Gretches, the 500 series guitars, are going to be in there, and they're going to sell stuff to kids learning how to play instruments, and they're going to make their money on lessons and gig bags and, you know, tiny little combo solid state amps and things like that. We don't have a lot of, you know, the norm style shops everywhere, right? And how can you, with that kind of inventory, how can you have a lot of norm style shops? Like I said, if you go into Nashville proper, I guess, you know, you have three major guitar shops in Groons, Carter's, and Rumbleseat. Those places you can find celebrities and songwriters and musicians every single day. Is it going to be to the point of what Norm gets? Probably not, because Norm's in California. You know, I don't know exactly the area that he's in, but I'm sure it's a hotbed for celebrities, and it obviously is because everybody goes there, right? Los Angeles is there, Beverly Hills is, you know, in California. So all these movie stars and musicians and, you know, rock stars, a lot of them live out there in California. So they're going to frequent, you know, the places they're at. And that's why you have Norm's Rare Guitars, is, you know, to give those people some really good instruments. So I'm glad it came out, and I want to talk about, before I get into the documentary, I wanted to talk about some famous guitar shops that I went to as a kid growing up in New York City. I grew up in Staten Island, which is a hop, skip, and a jump away from Brooklyn and Manhattan and Queens. And one store that was really cool, I was only at the store once, and it was really cool store, was Manny's Music on 48th Street in Manhattan. Really cool shop. This, I want to say, since I've moved to Nashville, I want to say this shop burned down, or had, I know there was a fire in this building, and I think that's evident from the black residue on the front of the building. But that may be from the fire, that may not be. But there was a fire, and I think there was the sprinkler system went off, and it leaked down into the bottom floor where Manny's was, and it destroyed a lot of the gear there. I think there's a new storefront, but again, I've only been there once. I was only at Manny's once. The other shop in New York that I went to a couple times, and I went there when I was a brand new guitarist, so I was like really in over my head when I got there, and that was Rudys Music Stop. I cannot remember what street this is on, but it was a tiny little shop, like just, you know, on the street, and you walk in and it was gorgeous. It had these beautiful wooden cases filled with vintage and upscale guitars. And like I said, I went there when I was a new guitarist. I started playing guitar a little later in life. I worked for a t-shirt printing company, and I would print the t-shirt logos on the t-shirts, and the manager at the place, Paulie, what's up, Paulie, if you're watching, Paulie would blast Beatles music all day long, 24/7. And I worked, and it was my summer job, and I worked there for many years, while I was in high school as well. And he would blast Beatles music while I'm printing shirts, and that's how I got introduced into the Beatles when I was 17, 18 years old. And he used to keep a Rickenbacker 325, the John Lennon model, in his office. And I told him, I really want to learn how to play guitar. And he's like, I'll teach you how to play guitar. And he taught me how to play guitar, teaching me Beatles song after Beatles song after Beatles song. And that's what got me into music and into guitar. But when I first started learning, very, very intimidated when you walk into a place like Rudys music shop. You're very intimidated walking into the music store where they sell reeds and Squires and Epiphones. Nevertheless, a famous place like Rudys. I barely knew a couple of chords, and you're going in there and you're looking around, you're scared to touch stuff. And a lot of people said that in the Norms documentary as well. But everyone seemed, at these places, people are really super cool. They tend to be really, really super cool, and they'll help you out. And they can tell that you're nervous, and they'll help you out regardless. The one that I went to the most often was the one in my hometown. And this is a really famous music shop, was Mandolin Brothers in Staten Island on Forest Avenue down in Port Richmond. And this looks like this looks like a crap hole, right? And you would never think this was a music shop just by walking by it. But when you go in there, it was a magical time capsule into the past. And sadly, it's closed. It's closed down now. The owners, I don't know if they just got old and sold it and wanted to retire and didn't want to run it anymore, or they had nobody else to run it after they were, into their later years. But this was a famous guitar shop. I believe Paul McCartney brought his Hofner bass there to get repaired. And I remember seeing that picture on the wall. I don't know if it was his Hofner bass or if it was his Rickenbacker bass. But Paul McCartney definitely brought one of his famous basses to Mandolin Brothers to get fixed. And that was like their big claim to fame. And you went into this place, and it was a house, essentially. It was like a multi-family dwelling that they just made into a guitar shop. I don't know if they lived on top. They might have lived on the top floors of these. But when you went in there were rooms, like in a house, right? You had compartmentalized rooms, and each room was just walls and walls of guitars with couches in the middle or stools and amps lined up along the ground. And every, in the main area, the main lobby, when you walked in, that's where all the new stuff was. So if you wanted to buy a new D18 or a new D28 or they had some Epiphones on the wall too. They had some new stuff, lower end stuff. That was in the main area. But if you went into any of the rooms that were off the main room, they were like specialized for certain things. So there was one room with just like pre-war Martins in there. And there was another room that just had all like Spanish style guitars, like archtop style guitars. And that's where I first fell in love with the White Falcon. I had no idea what that was. I didn't know. Like I said, when I first started playing, I used to go into these places and they would leave you alone. You'd be in a room. They wouldn't even see you. You would just be in this room by yourself, sitting on a couch with at the time, a $6,000-$7,000, 1962 or 63, Gretsch White Falcon in your hands. Not, I just learned how to play a G chord. I'm sitting there with a $7,000 guitar in my hand, or at the time, maybe it was $3,000 guitar. But, and then there'll be another room with just banjos everywhere, and another room with just mandolins. And it was just an amazing place to be. And, I miss going there. The people were super, super nice. He was like an old hippie. Like the guys who owned it were like these old white beard, like you can just tell that they were just, peace and love and 1970s hippies dudes. And they were just really cool. And they could play bluegrass. They played bluegrass so well. You'd go in there and they'd just all be jamming in there with their friends. It would be great. It reminded me a lot of Norm's when I was watching the documentary. So I wanted to put that out there and give you guys a little taste into what I was used to or growing up as a kid. So now let's get into the movie a little bit and how I found Norm, right? So if you don't know who Norm is, you may pass over this documentary. And I was really surprised. It didn't even come up in my feed. Like I turned on my Netflix and it wasn't there. I had to go search for it. And this just came out. I think on the 31st or on the 1st of the year, in January 1st. But it didn't come up on my feed for some reason. I don't know why. So I had to go search it out. And how I found Norm, and I think I mentioned this in one of my previous videos when I did the countdown of the collection, because Mark Agnesi is the host of that Gibson TV show. And I found Norm's rare guitars through Mark Agnesi, essentially. During COVID, I had mentioned this before. During COVID, I got into, you get bored, and I wanted to buy a guitar on Reverb, and I wanted to look it up and research the guitar to see, make sure it was real, because there's lots of scammers out there. We go through that a lot. And I typed into YouTube, like, I don't know, Rickenbacker 360, or whatever. And what was the first thing that came up was Guitar of the Day, Mark Agnesi playing a Rickenbacker 360. And if you don't know what Guitar of the Day is, take a minute, go, YouTube search Guitar of the Day, Mark Agnesi. There's a new guy who does it now. His name is Michael Lemo. Fantastic guitar player, like really, really unbelievable player, and does really, really cool things with the guitar. But for me, he's just not nearly as entertaining as Mark Agnesi was. And Mark Agnesi did it for like the first 5 years, and Lemo's been doing it for the last 3 or 4 years. And again, he's really great. He's a wonderful guitar player. But Mark Agnesi just has this charisma about him, and he taught me so much about vintage guitars and vintage gear. And what he does is he'll take 2 or 3 minutes, and he's in the back room of Norms, which you see in this documentary. And in the back room is where they keep the holy grail of guitars, right? They don't just keep 1950s Telecasters and Stratocasters out so people can touch them. You have to have like permission to like get a hold of those, or Norm has to bring it out to you if you're really serious, I guess. They're going to have old stuff on the floor, but the really, really holy grail stuff is going to be in this back room. So what Mark would do is Mark would, bring you to the case. He'd open up the case. He would show you the guitar. He would tell you why that guitar has certain appointments, when those appointments changed from year to year. And then he would go out on the couch in the main area of the shop, and he would play 2 to 3 songs, bits and pieces of songs on the guitar that he thought was a good representation of the sound that guitar gives, right? So if he had a White Falcon, like he's bringing up White Falcons because it's in my head right now, he might play a Neil Young song. He might play a piece of an AC/DC song because Malcolm used a White Falcon. He might play a cult song because Billy Duffy used White Falcons. And if he had, something else, maybe he had a Les Paul Custom or an SG, Junior or something like that, he would pick different songs that he thought were representative of those models. And you just learn a lot, right? You just learn a lot, and Mark's a great guitar player and everything else. And that's how I got into Norm's rare guitars, because I would watch that every single day. And it was Guitar of the Day on the Norm's Rare Guitar channel. And every once in a while, it's not just, the stuff on his channel would come up on my feed, and it's not always Guitar of the Day. That's not the only videos they made. They made tons of videos, and you would see all these celebrities going to Norm's Rare Guitars. You see Tom Petty just hanging out at Norm's Rare Guitars playing guitar. And you'd see Frank Stallone. He was always on. Frank Stallone was always on. And this is how I got into Joe Bonamassa. I had no idea who Joe Bonamassa was until I started watching Norm's Rare Guitars. And I see Joe Bonamassa on there talking about, the pots on a 63 ES 355 and why they're different than whatever else. And it was just, there's so much knowledge that came out of that store for me through YouTube. And thank God for YouTube, because I never would have known about that store. I lived on the East Coast. The store's all the way on the West Coast. And YouTube was able to bring that information to me, which was fantastic. So that's how I found Norm. The documentary itself is phenomenal. So if you get the chance, watch it. I can't wait to watch it again. This is one of those. It's one of those. I love music documentaries, and I have a habit of watching music documentaries over and over and over again, just to catch little things. I've watched the Metallica Making of the Black Album documentary 100 times. I've watched the Oasis, the making of Definitely Maybe 100 times. So many of these documentaries out there that I love just throwing on. And I know this is going to be one of those that I throw on. I have these traditions that I do because I'm a teacher. I get a lot of little breaks here and there. I get spring breaks and winter breaks and things like that, and Christmas breaks. And one thing that I do all the time is the first day of Christmas break, I'll come home, I'll throw on a documentary, and I'll just start changing strings on guitars that need it, right? And typically I have 2 or 3 guitars that need a string change by then, depending on how much I play them. But I'll always just I'll throw a concert on in the background, or I'll throw a documentary on in the background, and I'll start changing strings or polishing up guitars or cleaning stuff. And this is definitely going to be one that I do that too. I know that for sure. So the movie itself, or the documentary itself, goes through the early days of Norm through today. and it's really interesting to hear how he got started. One thing that really strikes me is at the beginning he did this kind of by accident. He finds a an ad in the newspaper for a Strat that he ended up getting for 125 bucks. He brought it home to his friends, and everyone loved it. And all his friends were calling up other friends to come and play the guitar. And he ended up selling it for a couple more bucks. And then he was like, "Wow, what if I went out and found cheap, good instruments for cheap, and sold them at a little bit higher price? I can make a living out of this." And that's what he did. And that's how easy it starts. You go out and you buy one guitar and you flip it and make double, and then you go out and buy two guitars and you flip those, and you go buy four guitars, and so on and so forth. And sometimes you get really, really lucky and you get a guitar for an insane deal like he did. He got some, vintage L5 Gibson that he got for like 25 bucks. He ended up getting broken. I don't want to spoil the whole movie, but it ends up getting broken on him. So I doubt he fixed it. But once you start getting that reputation, once he started getting that reputation, people started bringing him musicians that needed guitars because he says, he was living in these, small 2-3 bedroom apartments, and the apartments were just full and full of guitars, which is something I think we all aspire to. But famous musicians would go to his house and pick out guitars, and he would talk. He brought George Harrison to his house because George Harrison needed guitars. I'm not going to tell you everything because there are really cool stories in there that I don't want to spoil for you. But it goes through those early days of collecting, and he was just doing it out of his house. Now, I do a lot of trading with people, and I don't consider myself a Norm Harris because I don't do it. I don't collect and trade to make money off of the guitars. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I have 3 guys that I trade with or buy from all the time that I have on Facebook Marketplace that I consider them to be my little Nashville Norms, right? And not nearly as big and popular as Norm. These guys are just doing it out of their house as a side hustle. But I have one guy who kind of has a little bit of everything. He's got a little bit of low level amps, a little bit of high level amps, a little bit of SE PRS guitars, but then he'll have a core PRS guitar, and he'll have Gibson Les Paul standards, and he'll throw in there a custom every once in a while. So he's got a little sprinkle of everything. And then there's another dude that I always go to. He kind of focuses on getting vintage stuff. But the thing is, with his vintage stuff, most of them have had repairs in the past. So if you want to get an SG Junior and you want to get one for a decent price, you go to this guy Griffin that I look up in Nashville all the time on Facebook, and he might have an SG Junior, an old one, but it's probably had a headstock repair, so you're going to get it a little bit cheaper than you would, from one of the big stores in Nashville or something like that. But that's how Norm started. He was doing it out of his house, just like these guys are doing it out of their houses. And then eventually he went into a store, and then that store got filled up, and he went to a bigger store, and then went to a bigger store. And the bigger and bigger he got, the more, clout he got with musicians and with movie stars and things like that. And he was able to then use his clout as for something good, and he started charities, and he works with the Midnight Mission, and he gives back a lot. And there are some touching stories in this documentary that I'll leave for the movie to tell, but they're really heartwarming stories about how Norm has given back and how some of his customers have given back. Some of his famous customers have given back to the community. The ending was a little sad, and I wish they would have done the ending a little bit different, because they talk about, what happens after Norm dies, or what happens when Norm wants to retire. And I guess that's a good way to, go into that chronology, I guess. But the last 5 minutes was about that, and I could have done without that. Just want to show you here, I do have one of Norm's books. If you go on to Amazon, or if you go to any bookstore, Norm has a couple of editions of Norm's Rare Guitar books. You learn a lot of information about a lot of guitars in these books. Goes through all different types of Fenders and Gibsons and Martins and Rickenbackers and whatever else you can think of. And it has some really great pictures and photo books. This actually was one of the motivators for me to create a book. So I started a book for my collection. It's not nearly as thick as this book. Mine's only has about 35 guitars in it. Through the years, I don't have 35 guitars now, but over the years I've had, different guitars here and there. And I wanted to document them like Norm documents his in these books. And it's a really cool little hobby that I have, and I really enjoy doing it. So I suggest you go onto Netflix tonight or tomorrow, whenever you can. Watch Norm's Rare Guitars documentary. It's really, really good. You're going to love it if you're a guitar fan. I loved it, and I highly recommend it. And hopefully we can do some more music, movie, documentary kind of things in the future as well. I did see the new Bob Dylan movie, A Complete Unknown. If you guys want to hear my thoughts and takes on that, leave it in the comments. Tell me you want to hear it, and I'll do one of these videos just like this on that movie. But until next time, I'm Steve. Have a good one, guys. See ya.